Hello, this is Pastor Keith with another episode of Zion Plus. This is for Zion kids at home, Zion Plus. And today I want to talk to you about something that Stu said in his sermon on Sunday. He was basically talking about one verse. It said, it's true saying that Christ came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the foremost. And he was quoting the Apostle Paul. And the Apostle Paul said, I am the foremost sinner. I want you to think about that. I mean, because think of all the sinners in the Bible. Who were the worst sinners in the Bible? You might think of Adam and Eve. Adam was the first one to sin, and his sin brought sin on everybody. What if you did something that killed everybody in the world? Well, Adam's sin brought death, and Adam's sin brought death and sin to everybody in the world. Wouldn't that make him the foremost of sinners? Well, what about Cain and Abel? You remember that story, how Cain hated his brother Abel and was jealous of him and went out in the field and killed him. He was the first murderer in the Bible. First murderer. Isn't that a big, big sinner? Or what about, how about this is somebody's picture of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, when he ordered all the babies of the Israelites to be thrown into the river and drowned. That's a pretty big sin, don't you think? Herod, isn't his sin bigger? Isn't his sin really pretty big? Who else can you think of in the Bible that was really a big sinner? Herod's sin Pharaoh's sin makes me think of Herod's sin, King Herod. When Jesus was born and Herod heard about it, he had all the baby boys killed. Same kind of a thing that Pharaoh was doing. And so wasn't that a big sin, ordering the soldiers to go and kill baby boys? Is that even bigger? What about the wicked men who accused Jesus at his trial? Okay, they lied about him. They made false accusations. They wanted him killed no matter what. And so they took him to trial, and Jesus was crucified because of their false testimony and their lies and their hatred. How about, killing the very Son of God? Isn't that the biggest sin possible? What's the biggest sin possible? And why would the Apostle Paul sit there and write, Christ came to save sinners, of whom I am the foremost? I'm the biggest sinner there is. Why would he say that when you've got Adam that brings death to the whole world, when you've got the wicked rulers who crucified Jesus with no good evidence in their trial? Why would that be? Why is Paul doing that? And here's an idea. You should think about this. When you go to a mirror, it depends how close you stand to the mirror, how big you are, okay? If you stand way far away from the mirror, you are small, okay? I don't look very big. But if I get closer and closer and closer to the mirror, then I get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and I could get so close that all you could see is my freckles. So I think that's why Paul could say, I'm the biggest sinner, because he was close enough to God to know that his sin was big. And before God, that's all that he could see. That's all Paul could see. When you know that your sin is big, then you don't care about anybody else's sin. You start not to care about Pharaoh's sin or Herod's sin or Adam's sin or Cain's sin. You're not pointing your fingers at anybody else and their sin, because you're closer to God and closer to God. And Paul was one of those guys who was very close to God. God even took him up into the third heaven. And Paul saw things that he couldn't tell anybody about. And Paul knew his own sin. Of course, Paul had done terrible things. He had persecuted the church. He had chased Christians. He had had orders to put Christians to death before he was converted. And then Paul was converted, and Paul remembers those things that he did, and he knows who he was. And I think part of it is the terrible things Paul had done, but part of it also was that Paul was getting closer and closer to God. And he knew God better and better. And the better you know God, the bigger your own sin seems. If you stay far away from God, if you don't see him, if you don't think about him, you don't read his word, you don't listen to what he says, then you're not very much aware of your sin. You might think, well, I'm okay, I'm not that bad. But I tell you, when the Holy Spirit calls you to Jesus and you get closer and closer to Jesus, what happens to the apostles? They fall down and say, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. And that's the marvel of the gospel, is that God lets us see our sin enough so that we say, have mercy on me. And then he lets us see our sin more. And then he lets us see our sin more. And so as we live and we get closer and closer and see better and better, we begin to understand how bad our sin really is. And we can get to the place where we say with Paul, I am the chief of sinners. But you know what? It's a true saying that Jesus came into the world to save sinners. And once you know that you're a sinner and deserve to die, then you are ready to know that Jesus died for you. That is my Zion Plus for this week. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.